Freedom to me is being able to just be me, to be able to think and plan and mentally grow, getting out of the fixed mindset, knowing that if I don't know how to do something, I have the freedom to learn it. We went to school after leaving the religion, just taking in knowledge, being able to have friends, being able to explore different avenues of life and not, not feeling like I have to agree with somebody just because.
Welcome to Awaken to Freedom. I'm your host, Jada. This podcast is all about finding your freedom after leaving abusive environments, whether that's a cult, a toxic relationship, or a high control religion. Each week, we interview brave women who have escaped these controlling situations, discovered their voice, and gone on to lead incredible lives. Their stories are inspiring and offer encouragement to anyone listening that there is a way out and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you're a woman who would like to share her story and be a guest on this podcast, please visit awakentofreedom.ca. Join us every week for a new story of courage and hope. New episodes will be uploaded every Thursday. If you'd like to see our faces, please head over to the YouTube channel and don't forget to like and subscribe. Feel free to engage with the comments because that helps the algorithm and allows more people to view our content. So with that, let's get started. Welcome to Awaken to Freedom. I'm your host, Jada, and today I'm so excited to have with me Lady C. Lady C spent 30 years as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and for a few of those years, she served even as a regular pioneer, and for nearly 9 years, she was an elder's wife, navigating the pressures of leadership as part of a young couple trying to do everything right. Behind the scenes, though, she began noticing cracks in the teachings and the control, especially the way women were expected to stay quiet, follow rules, and shrink themselves to fit a mold. Eventually, she woke up to the truth about the truth. Today, she's free, no longer under religious control or male direction. Through her platform, Hidden Struggles, Lady C helps others heal, speak up, and rebuild their lives after leaving high control religion. So a big welcome to Lady C. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
You know, you were one of my OG people that I watched when I started watching content on YouTube for XJWs. You're the ones I went to and still do. So congratulations on all your success with that. You and JT have done a fabulous job. And then you yourself on your new content. We'll post the links for everybody to be able to head to your site after. But so nice to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So tell us, how did you get involved with being a Jehovah's Witness?
I was absolutely born into it. Not really born in, but this is where my mom took this religion when I was around 5 years old. Actually, she always knew about Jehovah's Witnesses because when she was a kid growing up, her father used to take Bible studies from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then my brother was in a tragic accident. He got hit by a car and killed walking across the street. So then my mother all of a sudden decides, oh, I want my son to have a witness funeral. And all of a sudden, my dad was like, because she was married to my dad at the time, and he had no idea that she was even affiliated with Jehovah's Witnesses and kind of shocked. And I remember him telling me some years later that his mother, when Jehovah's Witnesses came to her door, actually ran a Jehovah's Witness woman down the street. So you can just about imagine when my mother decided she was having a Jehovah's Witness funeral for her son. And it was like, my dad's like, huh? I don't know that you had any connection with Jehovah's Witnesses. But she did, because she studied with Jehovah's Witnesses growing up as a child. So when you think about, a person in this religion, you don't realize what they know and what they've been affiliated with until something tragic happens in their lives. So at that point, my mom, hey, look, she's going to be this Jehovah's Witness, and here we are. And so even though my dad was in the military at the time, my mom got baptized and stuck with it for the whole time. And not only that, we're the ones that woke them up when we finally woke up, my mom and dad. Yeah.
Oh.
So my dad, but it's interesting. And it was a very interesting situation because we didn't understand, me and my sister, why my mother and my grandmother on my father's side did not get along. And that religion really put a divide in our family. And it was when my dad told me about his mother's experience with Jehovah's Witnesses, because she was a Catholic. And my grandmother was such a staunch Catholic that she was even in the convent for 9 years. Never became a nun, eventually left, and of course got married and then had my father and his siblings. But I said it would have been really nice to know her experience not liking witnesses, and that would have helped me understand why she and my mom did not see eye to eye. So it was kind of difficult, trying to please your mother and then going to visit your grandparents and they're not getting along and the whole nine. So it was kind of difficult, but we didn't live near them. So we just went there to visit, and we didn't go there that often, but the visits that we had were not good, for my mom and her mother-in-law, So then years later, I was raised in the religion. So my mom said, this is her attitude about being a Jehovah's Witness. As long as those doors are swinging in and out, I'll be going to the Kingdom Hall. So of course, that was what she did for me and my sister. And of course, after losing her son, that's what really made her stay on the course, because as they promise, you're going to see your loved ones again later on in the resurrection. So my mom was like, I'm not leaving. I'm going to be right here waiting to see my son later on. And so as the years went on, I had ups and downs about being a witness, not wanting to go to meetings as a young kid because I wanted to be with my friends, and the time that I would be able to spend with them was on meeting nights. And so you just didn't have that, you just couldn't do that. And so it wasn't until years later when I turned 18 that I decided, hey, look, I think I'm going to go ahead and become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and got baptized. And the rest is history. Then I met JT. Then, of course, we got married and the whole 9 yards,
So what eventually woke you up then?
Well, I'll tell you this before I get to that part. So, when the internet started becoming popular, well, we had bought our first computer, JT and I. And because we had such a great communication, with each other, we always talked about stuff that happened in the Kingdom Hall. And we never turned each other in. We would notice there were issues with personalities in the congregation. JT was in a body of elders where there was tension, and we talked about it, just the two of us. So it wasn't like he was going to a meeting, having issues, or watching the issues, because he was actually observing these issues on the body. And he wasn't one of those brothers that just came home and kept everything in. He shared that information with me. Oh. And then we would see the circuit. We had this one circuit overseer that was a hot mess. I mean, just a very difficult personality. He and his wife were so controversial at the different congregations that people were actually talking about how rude she was and things like that, the circuit overseer's wife. And it was kind of like a difficult time. So we were talking about the different things that was going on. But JT was the kind of person who was like, hey, look, I'm not getting involved in personalities. You got to bring something else to me, because, Jehovah's going to clean these people out of the organization. I wasn't that person, though. I didn't really care about that. I was like, if these people are supposed to be God-loving, God-fearing, they should be nice today, not in some future new system or paradise earth. Let's get the party started now. Let's be nice to people right here while we're here now. That was my attitude. And that was one of the biggest things that I always complained about. So then fast forward, the internet comes out. And I'm like online because I'm very inquisitive. I love knowledge. I just want to know. I'm that in the know person, want to know. And so the first thing I did when I went online to do the search, I typed in Jehovah. So of course, what comes back. But you got to remember, this is in the 90s. So okay. At this point, it's like we don't have like Google search like we have today. We didn't have YouTube and all that. But we did have this online bulletin board. The first one that came out was called H2O. The next one was Jehovah'sWitness.net. And then we also were online reading a lot of the stories from Randy Waters online, right? So anybody who goes back that far would probably remember some of these bulletin boards and websites. And I used to go there all the time and read about the women's stories on Randy Waters' site. And I'm like, tell him, sister, you know you got it going on, because she was on point. And sometimes you're feeling a certain kind of way, and then you don't know how to express that. You really just don't know the words to say. But when you start reading those words that somebody else is saying, then you're like connecting. Yes, I like what she's saying. That's how I feel. And it was all about the way women were being treated. Sit at home, be quiet, go to the meetings, support your husband, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're out in field service. Make sure you're, whatever it is you got to do to make this man look good, that's what they wanted, right? So I'm connecting with all these stories online. JT and I are talking back and forth, and we're still noticing the crazy personalities in the congregation. People are doing stuff, not showing love, circuit overseers acting crazy, brothers in the body fighting and carrying on. I remember when JT had his first elders meeting, and it got to be 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, where is he? I'm thinking, he'll be home shortly. And then when it got to, and I said to myself, well, maybe I should call this sister in the congregation to find out, if her husband had gotten home yet. And then I didn't do that. But then it got to be midnight, and I'm like, I should have called her 2 hours ago, because now it's too late to be calling somebody. And I remember he must have came home like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, whoa. I was so nervous. I was pacing the floor trying to figure out, where is he at? This is so unusual for me, waiting for my husband to come back from an elders meeting. I'm thinking, was he in a car accident? I mean, come on now. You're thinking, when you go to the Kingdom Hall, you're thinking, you go to the Kingdom Hall, you're there for 2 hours, you come home. So you're not thinking that your husband's going to an elders meeting and is going to be spending half the night at some elders meeting. So you don't, and then they're not calling. So your husband's not calling to say, hey, look, meeting ran late. We're going to be back. I'll be home in a couple of hours, whatever. You just don't know nothing, right? But then later on, I was talking to somebody, and they said, well, don't you know that this is what happens with the elders at the meetings? They're there all night long and this and that and the other. But this body of elders was just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I think that's one of the major cracks in JT's foundation too, was the fact that the body wasn't getting along. So here you're at the Kingdom Hall, right? And you got all these brothers, and everybody's walking around smiling, laughing with the friends and everything. And then you get behind the meeting, or you go to these elders meetings, and the brothers are in there. It's a whole different attitude, whole different thing going on. So he would talk about that type of stuff with me, and how he just wasn't comfortable dealing with that. And we had this one brother that was good friends with JT. In fact, he used to come over to our apartment, and JT would kind of give him an edge up on his hair, because when JT was at Bethel, he used to do that for the Bethelites when they couldn't get into the barbershop. JT would edge up their hair for them, because he was doing that for himself. And so that brother went from coming over to our house, getting a hair edge up, to not talking to us at all, because he was trying to pull JT in on his side and everything. And JT was like, no. He was looking at it for what it really was. And so he was like, he wasn't gonna fall for that. So of course, there was another brother that kind of took that other brother's side, and JT stayed with the other brothers, because he realized that what was going on was wrong. So that was his major crack in the foundation. So then, with all of us, with JT and I talking about the personalities in the congregation, the elder body, and what we were learning about the information online, all of a sudden, I remember one day I was walking out of our bedroom, and I could sense that there was something heavy weighing on JT's mind. And he said to me, he said, "You got a second?" And I said, "Sure, what? What's going on?" And he said, I just want to bring something up to you. And he told me later on he was really nervous, but I guess he felt comfortable because we had already been talking. And he talked about the 1914 teaching. And he said that he was going to try to stick it out until the year 2000. And he said, if things don't change by the year 2000, he said, I'm out of here. And so I had a moment of, hey, look, this is crazy. I mean, I'm going to tell you, all of 30 minutes. And the reason why is because I had just met a sister in a neighboring congregation. And I met her through JT because he and her husband were at Bethel together. And she and I clicked. Finally, somebody I'm clicking with in the organization. Now we got to leave, right? So we became friends and everything, me and the sister. And she was somebody I could relate to because she was going through some of the same things that I was going through. But like I said, all of 30 minutes of me saying, oh my God, we got to, but we didn't even make it to the year 2000. We didn't. I mean, once you realize that this is not the truth, then you can't keep going to the Kingdom Hall. And I remember, I remember it was so crazy because one of JT's buddies had moved down from New York City, he and his wife, and he was at Bethel. They applied for Bethel. They didn't get accepted, so they came to our congregation. And he was looking at JT, and he kept looking at JT not wanting to do more, even as an elder. And he was like, when we were at Bethel, you said you were going into the circuit work, So he's looking for JT to have all these conversations about, I'm going to go into the circuit work. So when I leave Bethel, I'm going to be pioneering. So I'm going to tell you right now, it was hard. Having them in our congregation, it was hard because he and his wife, they kept looking down on me because I was working full time. I wasn't working part time at the time. I was not pioneering, but they kept on looking at me and dogging me out. And I could tell because I can read a room, and I could tell when they were trying to look at me and make it seem like I'm not being spiritual. You're the one that's bringing him down because if he wasn't married to you, he would still have these goals to be a circuit overseer. We know it's got to be her because you know how people, this is their friend, this is his friend, and now he's married to you, and now you're keeping him from moving on, right? So at this point, JT is like, when we find out this is not the truth, he's starting to scale back on his, assignments, going out to give talks and everything like that. So the brother calls him to the side and says, look, he goes, he tried to give him an example of being on a basketball team. And one brother is a teammate is on the starting team. And there's a guy on the sidelines and he can't even get in the game, but you're in the game, but you don't want to play. That was what he told JT. And so at that point, it was like, JT knew what he was trying to do. And I think this is right before he told me about what was happening with him and the 1914 thing. Because I kept saying to JT, why don't you go give that talk at that congregation? What's wrong with giving that talk? Why don't you want to go do this and that and the other? Why don't you want to do more or whatever? Now, people ain't realizing that I'm behind the scenes saying that, but I'm miss unspiritual right now because you ain't pioneering and you working full time and all this kind of stuff. But I'm saying, hey, why don't you go ahead and give that talk? But JT said, nope. The reason why he couldn't do it was because he could no longer stand on that platform and tell people that this is the truth, quit your job, pioneer, whatever it is they were telling people, he couldn't keep doing that, So it was a very interesting thing. And that brother that I'm talking about, that was his buddy at Bethel, he was trying to get appointed as an elder. And when he came in, he wasn't getting good recommendations from the congregation he was coming from. And I think he really wanted JT to put his neck on the line or his reputation to tell the brothers to appoint him But that just wasn't happening either, because that's just not how JT, he's not going to do that, you know. So it was an interesting time, especially having that couple in our congregation, because they were like, just, they were the people that would just go through the congregation, and they were walking around talking to the friends in the congregation. Had this one elderly couple crying, and they were saying, I noticed that you haven't given a talk. You're not, and the sister said she wasn't on the school. And so they were giving people a fit, and nobody really liked them, because they were trying to be spiritual giants, and they just weren't being friendly, you know. But they were just hypocrites in my estimation. It was all about them, you know, being on the fast track. They wanted to be somebody. They wanted to be somebody, and they couldn't. And so I can't remember if the husband got appointed as a ministerial servant, but he was trying to get to be an elder. That was not happening.
Yeah, it sounds
That
like
was
more
not
like
happening.
they're like spiritual bullies.
Yeah, they were. They were definitely bullies, you know. And even though I knew that they were really talking about me, it wasn't that they outwardly really said it. It's just that they were making comments about other people, and I was saying, that's the same thing they're saying about me. You know, they were saying the same, and so I said, because I could read a room, and I knew how people like that were, you know. So it was interesting. But anyway, so like I said, we had to walk on eggshells getting out of here, and so when JT talked about the 1914 changes, that is when we actually started to do even more research. That's when he was going back and forth on the internet with people, because he was really into it. When I found out this wasn't the truth, I was going deeper into my career, my business. I was networking with people that were not Jehovah's Witnesses. I had just started my own business, and I was doing some freelance work and stuff like that in the DC area. And I just started doing computer training, and I must have trained in every office in DC. So I was really getting into my career. And JT was on the computer going back and forth with all these people, and they were going back and forth talking, and just, you know, just kind of, you know, they were just, you know how people do on the internet now. Oh, you're not right. Go read this book. I'm not going to read this book. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And all that kind of stuff. And JT ended up ordering Crisis of Conscience. And that is when the dam kind of like blew apart. That's when the dam, you know, just went, you know. So at that point, it was like, we're out of here. Once he read that book, once he read Crisis of Conscience, we were done. We were done. So, but we were together. It was kind of scary. You know, we didn't know what to do in terms of talking to people. Like, JT knew he wasn't going to talk to nobody. He knew that. But we just kind of felt, it was a funny, eerie feeling for me in terms of, I didn't, in the back of my mind, at first, when we first left, I was thinking, what if this really is the truth? And we're leaving. I had that going on. When we first stopped going, the first thing we did was we went to a different congregation's memorial, because we didn't want to go to our own memorial. And so we went to a neighboring congregation's memorial, and JT was not giving the talk. And I remember this one brother who used to go to our congregation, and when we walked to the front door, he said, "What are you folks doing here? This is not your congregation." You know, like that. And we were like, we know, we're here. So I guess he kind of felt, I guess that brother probably kind of felt like, what's going on? Why are they over here? He's not giving a talk. Why aren't they at their memorial? But we went to that memorial because we didn't want to go to ours. You know, I don't even know why we decided to, you know, go to that particular one, that particular congregation, but we did. That was our last meeting. That was our last meeting. And then we did not go to the convention that year. And it was for me, it was the scariest thing And this is what I told JT. Everybody in our congregation is going to the convention in Richmond, Virginia, because we were living in Alexandria at the time. And I said, we're going to be in Alexandria all by ourselves, just like that, And because if we needed something, everybody was going to be gone to the convention. And I'm thinking to myself, but even if we needed something, they weren't going to be trying to help us out because we left the organization. But they didn't really know that we had left. We were fading. And at that time, we didn't even know that was a thing, right? Here's the kicker. We told the friends in the congregation that we were moving, right? And so this one sister who lived in our apartment complex, she would have people coming and going. And I remember the more we saw people and ran into people, and we were still living in our apartment, they were looking at us like, I thought they said they were moving. They're still here. How come they're not at the meeting? That was the look that they had on their face when they would see us. And I remember seeing this one sister the last time we saw her, and she was like, and I told JT, I can't wait until we get out of here, because we were actually having our house built in another state, and it was taking them a little bit longer to do it. And I mean, it got held up for 7 months. A 2-month project turned into a 7-month project. And we lived in an apartment building that was it's not gated in the true sense of the word gated. It's just the bar comes up and down. And in order to get into our complex, you had to have a code. If you didn't have a code, you couldn't get in. So you would have to park on the street and make your way in and walk in like that. And then you still had to be buzzed in. So at this point, one night we saw somebody trying to get buzzed in or whatever it was, and we never opened up our door. One time, the friend of JT's that I was telling you about, that wanted to become an elder but didn't get appointed when we were there, he came over our house to our apartment, and he told us, he said, yeah, I was trying to find out if you were here. He said, and I put my hand on your car to see if it was warm, to see whether or not you had just pulled in or whatever. It was like, we were like, oh my God, you're gonna be kidding me. But mind you, this brother comes in, and I didn't say one word. I may have said hi to him or whatever the deal is. JT spoke to the brother. Do you know, maybe a year or two later, we got word that this brother said that I cursed JT out for allowing him to come into our apartment. And I was like, that is just like something he would do, okay? So what happens when you leave this organization, they will demonize your character. They will say things you never said, and they will try to make you look like you are just from the devil. And I mean, he talked about me like a dog. And I'm saying, okay, fine. I don't care, because I know I didn't do what you said, And so when people, would see you, which fortunately, after we left, we rarely ran into anybody. Thank goodness. And when we did, it was always cordial. But that brother was a hot mess. And then, like I was getting ready to tell you the story about these other brothers that were coming to our house. Even to this day, we don't know who they were, but JT thinks he knows who it was. But they were coming to our apartment just like everybody else was trying to call to find out why we weren't going to the meetings. We would have notes in our door. This one sister had left a note saying that the circuit overseer was in town. She wanted us to meet that circuit overseer. Oh, I think you would really like this brother. And she wrote a note, put it in the door and stuff like that. But eventually we had moved out of the apartment and got away from all that nonsense. But it was a lot. There was a lot going on.
Oh
you
my
know.
word. You're so lucky that you and JT had that type of relationship that you were together on that, because that does not happen very often. Or I didn't have that happen because I left my husband that was a witness, and then the husband that I'm married to now is not a witness. But you hear stories of that where it's, trying to wake one up. I interviewed just June, and her story of her husband trying to, gently trying to wake her up. It's so that's amazing that you guys did this together. But what was your hardest part of walking away? Like, how was that?
I was rejoicing, really, I have to say that, because when I was, okay, before I got married to JT, my life was a little bit different because I had friends that were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was an easy thing because when you think about your friends, and I'm talking about people at work and my non Jehovah's Witness family, I was able to see the differences between Jehovah's Witnesses and people that were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And I always found that the Jehovah's Witnesses were not as friendly as the people that I was friends with outside of the congregation. So when JT and I got married, it was like you could feel the jealousy from a lot of the friends in the congregation, the sisters, because when we got married, we ended up in a congregation where most of the elders were older than us. All of the elders. We were the youngest. JT was the youngest brother on the body. And then we had a lot of single sisters from 8 to 80. No joke. So I didn't fit in with that culture of that congregation. So it was like, was it really hard for me to leave that? No. Was it hard for me to lose friends that I had made over the years? Yes, because I was meeting people and I knew other people that didn't go to my congregation, and I knew I was going to lose those friendships. You know, fortunately, my parents did not live in the same area that we lived in because they lived in Ohio and we were in Virginia. So it was like, you don't really have to say anything to your family because they're living someplace else. They're not going to know you're not going to meetings. But I like to talk. And I was telling my mom that we stopped going to the meeting. And JT was like, you better stop telling your mom that because she's going to start shunning you. I don't care. I'm telling my mom anyway, you know? And so I was just talking and just telling her. And I got to the point that she would not talk to me for 3 weeks. And this is pre, you know, cell phones where you get unlimited long distance. And me and my mom talked 2 or 3 times a week. So, you know, if I was going to be losing her, that was going to be really hard for me because we talked all the time, right? So I was really, really rejoicing that we were getting out of this religion. I did not really care for the structure, the way the women were treated and all that kind of stuff. But I will say this, I missed what I thought was friends that we could count on. Because, you know, you're leaving, you don't live in, my family was all in Michigan and my mom and dad were in Ohio. So it was like, we have no support system. Mm-hmm. If something was to happen to us, what do we do? And do you know, I ended up in the hospital, not because of the situation with us leaving. I got sick and I ended up going to the emergency room and they kept me overnight in Alexandria. And I think that was one of the most frightening times. And JT was like, you got to put your religious denomination. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to put that on my Jehovah's Witness. And he said, no. He said, I used to do rounds at the hospital. And if the brothers come here and see your name being registered and you don't have Jehovah's Witness, we're going to have to deal with that. And so because I didn't want to even be affiliated anymore with Jehovah's Witnesses, even at the hospital. So he said, just in case somebody comes through there and checking to see if any Jehovah's Witnesses are at the hospital, then at least I wouldn't be saying that I'm not affiliated. So that was kind of scary, you know. But you know, we got past that. Nobody came, and if they did, they never told me about it, you know. But so I think the biggest thing, like I said, was the support group, losing out on that and not knowing what to do if you had something coming up, you know.
Well, it's nice that you were never actually shunned by your mother then.
For that 3 weeks I was. That
And
3 weeks I was.
and then that was it though. Like she was fine after that.
Well, she had to be fine because, I mean, well, she still came to visit. It was very interesting because my parents came to visit us after we moved into our house. My mom was still going to the meetings. My dad had stopped going because well, I told him all the while. In fact, my dad was getting frustrated with me and JT. And every time we would go to an ex-Jehovah's Witness meetup, my dad would proudly announce, and they left me in. They left me in. He goes, they wouldn't even tell me that they had left. I knew you guys stopped going because the last time you came to our house to visit, you didn't even bring Kingdom Hall clothes. Y'all didn't even go to the Kingdom Hall. And so we were trying to explain to him that we really were still going to the meeting that last time we came to visit my mom and dad. But JT had decided that he was not going back to that congregation anymore because it was a sad group of brothers. And he said, I'm not going back to that Kingdom Hall because it was just a sad congregation. That was just his way of dealing with them, you know? And so, but my dad was like, y'all didn't tell me. So I said, where were you at when I was telling mom that we stopped going? You know, and he said, she didn't say nothing to me. My mother did not tell my dad that JT and I stopped going to the meetings. And years later, it clicked because she felt like he was spiritually weak. So he wasn't going to meetings. He didn't want to go to the meetings either. And he didn't know why, but he didn't get baptized until he was 50 years old. So you got to understand, you know. And he said he got baptized because he didn't want to lose connection or contact with me after I married JT. So he decided to get baptized. But he never really progressed to anything after he got in, right? So my mom, she didn't want to let him know that we stopped going because I guess she felt that was going to give him incentive to stay home and not go. You know, because why would you tell somebody that we stopped going to the meetings, and that would make his case even stronger, right? But and I mean, even when I was growing up, my mother never told me to become a witness. She never pushed it down my throat. The only thing she said was, as long as those doors are going opening and closing, I'll be going to the Kingdom Hall. Took me there. I learned on the platform what the religion was all about. And I, in my heart, decided this is what I want. So she never did that. She never tried to get me to get baptized or nothing like that. She also never tried to convert my dad.
Mm.
She never, and I guess that's why they didn't have issues.
Yeah.
But she never told him, come on and go to the meeting. You want to study the Bible. She didn't do none of that, you know? And so my dad did, like, he became a Jehovah's Witness on his own, you know? And that's what happened to him. But I'm just saying, you know, my mom, I really thought they were talking. And like I told you, JT and I were talking. So I just naturally thought that they were talking. And so I remember one day I was talking to my father, and I was telling him about what we were learning on the internet. And I remember JT walking by my office saying, you better stop talking to your dad. He's going to turn you in, you know? And my dad said to JT, he said, why would you even think I was going to turn you in? He said, I was never a person like that. He said, I would have never turned you in. And I said to my dad, I said, people do the things that they think what they would do. JT knew that he would turn you in. And so in turn, he felt that you would turn him in. And this is the reason why he wasn't saying anything, you know? And so my dad said, yeah, because I knew something was going on. He said, because when I emailed JT and asked him about this talk I was giving, because he was still going to the meetings and he was giving talks on the school. And he said, and he never responded. And he said, he goes, I knew something was up, but he just didn't know what it was. So we waited to really come totally out and tell him about the religion. And I'm going to come back full circle and tell you about my mom coming here. So my dad got Crisis of Conscience. He read it. He understood it. He and I were emailing back and forth. And at this point, things are going downhill. My mom is giving him a hard time. And like I was saying before, she never tried to recruit him before he became a witness. But when he became a witness and then he decided that he didn't want to be one, then it was like a pretty bad time for him. Okay? But because my dad wasn't going, he would still come to the DC area to visit and to visit me. He also had a sister and other relatives here. So naturally, mom was coming along, right? Okay. So one time they got here, and we always have Jehovah's Witnesses coming to our house, knocking on the door, trying to proselytize, right? This one time that my mom and dad were visiting, my mom was still going to the Kingdom Hall, and the Jehovah's Witnesses were at the door. And my mom goes, I'm going to go down here and say hi to my sister, because out in field. So I said, Mom, I said, don't you go down there telling that woman that we're Jehovah's Witnesses, former Jehovah's Witnesses. I said, because we don't want that at our new house. We don't want Jehovah's Witnesses coming here, messing with us. After we moved from Virginia over to Maryland, we didn't want that because we done made a clean break. Nobody knows who we are. And I said, we do not need this, But my mom, she did go talk to that sister at the door, but she didn't tell her that her daughter was a Jehovah's Witness. And we didn't have any problems after that. But it wasn't too long later on, mind you, check this out. My mom, for some reason, got a hold of the information about the child abuse cases. I don't want to say the words. I don't want you to get, So, anyway, we put her in contact with Barbara Anderson.
Wow.
And my mom talked to Barbara Anderson, and they talked for a long time. And that kind of helped us out because, and I don't know if Barbara remembers that or not, but my mom talked to Barbara Anderson, and she told her all about the research that she had done. Because Barbara had done all this research because, at Bethel, she was the one that cracked that case. And when JT was at Bethel, he used to work for Barbara's husband, Joe. So he knew them. And, because Barbara and Joe came, when Barbara and Joe, I think she was on Dateline or something it was. Well, they stayed at our house that weekend. And then we took them over to the studio, to the hotel. They followed us in the car, and we showed them how to get over there for her to be on the show. And they ended up going to their hotel from there, but they stayed one night with us. And we got a chance. Some other witnesses came over. We took them out to brunch and stuff like that. So, but anyway, the bottom line is she was able to help us to wake up my mom. She may not have realized it, but my mom was so through when it came to that child abuse cases and stuff like that. She was done. She was so done with this religion at that point, and I don't know what, triggered her, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back for her. She was done.
Yeah.
I think that what you're talking about has woken up a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. So we had been through it. It was interesting because my mother, for years, it was there's 10 people in my mom's family, and like I said, I don't know if I told you this or not, but they studied as kids, and so they all kind of started coming back to Jehovah's Witnesses. So my mom has 6 brothers, and 2 of her brothers started studying with the witnesses. One of them got baptized, and one of them, I think he was not baptized, but he was going to the meetings. And he had a daughter that got baptized that started shunning us, right? And it was my mom's, it was 4 girls in her family. And all 4 girls were Jehovah's Witnesses. So we went from just our family, my mom me and my sister actively being in the religion, and no one else really participating. My mom had a younger sister that was, but she didn't live around us because her husband too was in the military. But for the most part, all my cousins, they celebrated birthdays, holidays. They grew up, had a life, and didn't have the issues that we had in school. And then all of a sudden, one by one, everybody's getting baptized. Everybody's becoming regular pioneers. We told the way, we didn't have a childhood. They had everything. Now you all decide, oh, we're going to be Jehovah's Witnesses after we become adults. And now, they had a great childhood, or they had a better start than I did, right? And now you're shunning me, so that was kind of crazy, so it kind of flipped, oh, this wonderful Jehovah's Witness woman with her kids, they're going to the meetings, they're sacrificing their lives and trying to do all this stuff and, go to the Kingdom Hall and not do birthdays, holidays, and all that. But now everybody's trickling into this religion, and it didn't happen in that order, but for the most part, like I'm saying, a lot of my cousins that are shunning me today, they didn't even grow up in this, they just came into it later, and then all of a sudden, one by one, this one sister of my mom, all her kids just totally left. They were like, we're out of here. We're not doing this anymore. So we got a little bit of, half in, half out kind of thing. People in our family. So we've had it. Our family has been totally destroyed because of this religion. Mm-hmm. And there's so many moving parts in my family. So I hope you guys are kind of understanding what I'm saying. But there's so many moving parts with so many people, because you had one sister that became a witness, became inactive, right? My mom is still coming to visit in between moving around with my dad on these different military bases. We go home to visit that sister who's now way out in the world, right? We're actually staying at her home. Me and my sister are staying at her home, and my mom is staying with her parents. But we're with that sister who's inactive, right? So years later, she comes back to the Kingdom Hall, full force. And when I say full force, when my mother died, she literally had nothing to do with me. Nothing. Before my mom died, she didn't have nothing to do with her. So she went from being this inactive witness, went way back out into the world, came back, never disfellowship, to becoming this witness who is straight as an arrow, have nothing to do with nobody. And my sister goes, you need to call her on the phone and let her know that mom has passed. She wants to hear from you. Now, mind you, JT was telling me I wouldn't touch it, I wouldn't deal with it, but you know what I did? I don't care. I sat down, I wrote a letter, I put my phone number in there, told her that I missed her, loved her, whatever, sent the obituary, sent it off, and never heard one word from her again. I mean, I shouldn't say again. I didn't hear back from her. She never responded, So it was like, we go way back, because I'm telling you, when my parents were in between my dad taking assignments at different military bases, that was the auntie that we had to stay with. And I actually, we lived with her long enough, for my mom and dad to get settled back. We were moving to Minnesota at the time, and we were coming back from like one of his assignments. And so we moved to Michigan to live with that aunt. So I'm telling you, we were a close-knit family. Right. And our family, when I say we had community in that little town that my mom was from in Michigan. And for this religion to break us up the way it did, it was terrible. Terrible to have a close-knit family to not even acknowledge your own sister's death? Are you kidding me? The same woman that was there and we were helping, she was helping us out, we were helping them out, whatever, and now you're not going to even speak or acknowledge your own sister dying? Give me a break. And then another sister who cut us off, who told my dad that the reason why she unfriended him on Facebook is because he was friends with a disfellowshipped sister. And my dad goes, he was just so hurt by that because same sister, that's different sister. He goes, I've been knowing her since she was 9 years old. In fact, she was the one that was babysitting us the night my brother got killed, that auntie. She came to live with us in Minnesota. That's where she met her husband. I was in her wedding, the flower girl. Her daughter was the flower girl in my wedding, you know. So our lives were, you know, like intertwined and everything, and we did everything together. And then all of a sudden, she cut off me and my father right before she passed. Wouldn't have nothing to do with us because we were, and when my dad said, oh, because he was friends with the Jehovah's Witness online, and then my dad called her out, and he said, well, you're talking to your daughters, and they're not going to no Kingdom Hall. And she said, yeah, but she said, my daughters are not on the internet talking about this religion. Because she must have saw JT and I on our YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And my dad at the time was sitting there clicking like on our stuff. And if he's friends with her on Facebook, you know, Facebook will call you out sometimes and it'll show your friends that you liked some video. And I kept trying to tell my dad, you can't have two friends. You can't be friends with the witnesses and be friends with mom's family under the same name. But he wasn't. He goes, I don't really care. He goes, I can friend who I want to friend. You know, so he was already in that mindset. But I said, okay, there's a price to pay though. You chose to be there. You chose to, you know, be friends with ex-witnesses, commenting on our videos, and then staying friends with these Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's what's going to happen to you, you know. But we got over it. We got over it. You know?
You sure did.
Yeah, we got over it. We found new friends, but I'm just calling it out for what it is. You know, for people who lose their family, you know, that's on them. I'm looking at it from the angle of, I didn't lose you, you lost me. Mm-hmm. You know, because we know this ain't the truth. We know we got out of a cult, you know, and they're still there waiting for these promises to come through, you know. And I think that's the one aunt, the last one I just got through talking about. I believe she went back because she got sick. Mm. And I think that she was going to really be looking forward to this resurrection. Yep. And so that's what I'm saying. You know, when you ask me about what was the hardest thing for me, at first, I'll just piggyback on what my aunt, what I feel like she was going through. I'm going to say not having a hope in the resurrection. That was another thing. Was, you know what you were taught. And you know what you're going to be giving up. So what do you believe in now? You're no longer a Jehovah's Witness that told you your eventuality. You're going to be living on a paradise earth. If you die, you'll be resurrected. If you don't, you'll live on into the new system, right? So at that point, I mean, that was probably another big thing for me, was trying to get over that. And we get people that, you know, email us and we'll talk to different people about that. And I've come to peace with that. I've actually come to grips with not knowing. Mm-hmm. And I just say, never say never, because we don't know. But the thing is, you don't want to belong to a religion that is selling you false hopes and false dreams. I would rather not to know and just be the person that I am and looking to, be a good person and live my life and help other people to get to where they need to be in their lives. And if there is, something there for us later, then it'll be there. And I think that it's going to be there regardless of what you believe. You can believe anything you want to believe, but it's either there or not. And it's not going to always be the Watchtower's way of getting you there. And these are some of the things that people just got to realize. And I think, I honestly think that's the reason why a lot of people won't leave, because they really want this to be true. And so, but with all the changes in this religion, it just has to make people wonder, are they really getting their messages from God?
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And
Oh,
so
yeah.
once you begin to see, life for what it is, and you're comfortable in your skin, you realize that you don't know everything. And I often refer to my situation as being on a journey that only I can take. I can't be in everybody's head and telling you how to think and how to feel, because I've come to realize that people are wired differently to think the way they think, to interpret information differently based on how they're wired. And I think that's the problem that we had in the Jehovah's Witnesses. The Jehovah's Witnesses was telling everyone to think the same way, feel the same way, even work the same type of jobs. I mean, you often hear people talk about, oh, we had a cleaning business, so we could pioneer, right? But everybody doesn't want to be a maid or whatever, cleaning somebody else's house or office buildings or whatever it is, So I just come to realize that all the things I thought when I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and everything that I was feeling bad about because I felt like I wasn't, meeting up to the expectations the way everybody else around me was, I understand it's because of the way I was wired. Because the way I looked at the world, I didn't want to fall in line with this like Stepford Wives kind of thing. I kind of wanted my own identity, and I really hated to be like compared to other people in the organization where, look at them, they're just alike. Look at all these people, they're all just alike. They all talk alike, they all look alike, they all think alike. I didn't like that. I like to be different, and hope I'm not rambling too much, but I remember when I used to work at this one company, it's a private corporation, and I got this job through one of my pioneer partners. When we all moved to the DC area to serve where the need was great, it was 4 sisters living in, we were living in a house that a brother was renting to us. So the 4 of us were upstairs, and there was a pioneer couple that lived in the basement. And one of the sisters got a job, and when I came to town, when I finally moved into, we were living in Rockville, Maryland, and I ended up moving in with them. She told me about the job. They hired me on the spot. So I got this job. And let me tell you, there must have been like 25 Jehovah's Witnesses working at this company, and I hated it because I always had friends on the job that were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And this was the first job that I was at where it was all witnesses, and I could not go to lunch with my coworkers. Because let me tell you something, Jehovah's Witnesses, they didn't want to go out to eat because they didn't have any money. But and I'm not gonna say they didn't have any money, because it wasn't that expensive to go out and eat out, But when I was at my my jobs, when I was working in Michigan, after I got out of high school and stuff like that, people would go out to eat. We go to a Chinese restaurant. We would go get something to eat, come back to the office. But it wasn't like we were like hanging out with each other. It was like we just got together for lunch and different things like that. And we'd be talking to each other's desk and just talking about regular everyday stuff. So you felt more normal when you could be in a conversation with people who were not Jehovah's Witnesses, because you were able to just have What are you doing this weekend? To I'm having issues with my daughter or my son or my brother, whatever. What you can just have regular everyday discussions, and it wasn't about brother so and so's coming to the congregation to give a talk. Where's your circuit overseer? When is your circuit assembly? We didn't have to talk about that kind of stuff. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, you had to always try to show them that you were doing so much more Jehovah's Witness stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to pioneer this month. I'm trying to, oh girl, I wish I could regular pioneer. I wish I could. So everything that you talked about with Jehovah's Witnesses was always related to what are you doing for the Watchtower? But when you were talking to your coworkers, it was just everyday life, dealing with, even on down to, I bought a new dress or whatever it is you want to talk about. I'm going to this movie or whatever. But so I just really didn't like the fact that I had to be working with all these Jehovah's Witnesses, because if you went to lunch with somebody that was not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, oh, you were gonna get talked about. So it was rough. And then at that same company, there was this guy in the office, and I was getting on the elevator, and I overheard him talking to another fellow employee, coworker, and he was mad at one of the Jehovah's Witnesses. It was an elder in our congregation, and he goes, "Oh, he wasn't in my car. He was an elder at my job, and he worked at same place I did." And the guy said, "Oh, you know how he is. He was saying something about this brother that he didn't like," and then he ended the statement, and he said, "Because you know how those Jehovah's Witnesses are." So he got into a beef with an elder on the job, and then he kind of like labeled all the Jehovah's Witnesses at work. You know how they are. And so I just didn't like that. I didn't like that. And that same Jehovah's Witness elder that I'm talking about, you would go down to his office, because he worked in the print shop, and you would go down to his office, and he had all these bound volumes in there, all the latest Watchtowers, all the latest books and stuff, right there at work. So if he wanted to, witness or whatever it was, he had a whole spread of Watchtower literature right down there. And he wasn't the easiest person to get along with, But I mean, we carried that on our shoulder everywhere we went.
Yeah. So tell us, how long have you been out now? Like how long since you actually left?
We left in 1998.
1998. And were you actually disfellowshipped, or were you just faded? Like did you actually?
We faded.
Love it.
I mean, it's an interesting question that you asked, because we talked to so many people, and I was going to this stylist that did my hair, and she knows that I am a former Jehovah's Witness, and she says, "Oh, you got to meet the guy next door, because he was affiliated with Jehovah's Witnesses too, And so we hit it off, he and I, and come to find out, he knew this couple that went to JT's congregation in North Carolina. Not only that, but the elder's wife that JT's family, knew really well, because he was the elder in the congregation, was this guy's auntie, right? So we're talking, and this guy knew why he could not be a Jehovah's Witness, right? Guess what he asked me?
Are you disfellowshipped?
Nope.
Oh, what?
He said, "So what did you do to get disfellowshipped?"
Nope.
And I got this big old smile across my face, and I said to him, "Excuse me? What did I do to get this fellowship?" I said, "We didn't get this fellowship." I said, "We just walked away." I said, "We realized this wasn't the truth, and we just got out of there." And he looked when I tell you, he looked, and then he looked again, and he was like, "Wait a minute." He was like, he had never heard that before.
No.
Because he had been out of the religion for years. He had been disfellowshipped for many years, And he knew why he wasn't coming back. I ain't gonna put his name out there. I'm not gonna put his business out there, but I'm just gonna say this: he had never heard of a person that just walked away. You
Mm.
know, and I was trying to explain to him about why we left and everything, and he was still trying to give credit to the organization for certain things. And I told him, I said, listen, this is what happens when people, they either walk away or they're disfellowshipped and they don't do their research to find out what this religion was all about. And I told him, I said, there's so many people, and I said, and we call them walk-away believers. But he was disfellowshipped, so.
Well, I think it's a shock because, I mean, I'm in Canada, so maybe it's a bit different here, but they will hunt you down. Am I right?
You're
Normally,
right.
that's what they do. They will come knocking, they will hunt you down until they can make that announcement from the stage that you are disfellowshipped. So it is rare that you got to just fade. So good for you, because
Yeah.
that doesn't get to happen very often.
Well, see, JT knew how to fade.
Yeah, right.
See,
It's
he
Melvin.
knew. One of the things that he knew was they would actually, when we had a situation in our congregation about this sister that they could not reach. Well, guess what they did? Guess how they reached the sister?
How?
They sent her a certified letter. She
Made
had
her
to sign
sign
that
for it.
letter. So when they sent that certified letter in, then they were able to say that she had been served, right? Okay, whatever it is, I'm sure that's what it was. It's the one that you got to get a signature on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so after we moved, we didn't get people coming to see us. And remember, I told you it was gated, so you couldn't just walk in to our apartment complex. Okay, so I remember it was like not long after we left, and we had gotten a piece of mail that came into to our PO box. And JT was like, wait, don't open that. Don't look. Let's examine this to see what it is, because he knew about that certified letter, but it was totally something different. But I'm just telling you that because he understood how things worked. Number one, he knew, don't talk. Do not talk. Because that's how people associate you with questioning the organization. I made some mistakes leaving. I made mistakes. I actually, there was this sister in our congregation, and she had stopped going to meetings. And I said to JT, I bet she knows. I bet you she knows this is not the truth. So I called her on the phone. I started talking. And I said something that gave it away. Not quite where she could go turn me into the brothers, but you know what she said to me? She said, "What did you just say?" Like that. At that point, I was like, "Ooh, you better keep your mouth shut." So I'm just simply saying, I kind of touched the burner, the hot burner, and I pulled away, realizing, wait. And that was because I wanted another person that I personally knew to wake up and be leaving with us so that we wouldn't be by ourselves. That was another thing that was driving me crazy, was being out here alone. And it's just me and JT with nobody else. And so, and I think a lot of people are like that. And I actually told my experience to people just like on a one-on-one, letting them know that you can't talk to other people.
No. Nope, it does not work.
Cannot talk to people. I mean, there was just so many things that, I discovered, and things that I would never do again. Like I went out to lunch with this sister, and she was not in my congregation. I just met her through another person. And I remember we were at the restaurant, and we were sitting at the table, and I don't know what I said to her, but she told me, she said, if you tell me that you don't think this is the truth, She said, you see that table of people over there? She said, those are my coworkers. And she says, and I have no problem getting up and going over there and having lunch with them. Stuff like that, so I'm just saying, so I must have been really talking. But I wasn't saying enough for them to turn me in,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a touch and go situation. Even the sister that was in my congregation, I'm sorry, the sister that was the maid of honor, not the maid of honor, the sister who was one of the bridesmaids. She was a good friend of mine. She lived in Ohio. And I remember talking to her on the phone, and she says, oh, don't worry about it. She said, you can tell me anything. She was like, pfft. She said, I'm strong, and I don't have a problem. If you want to, believe what you want to believe, you could do that if you want to. I mean, and she was just going on and on about how it was okay, that I could tell her anything, and that she was having a get-together, and we were going to be going to visit my parents in Ohio in a couple of months, and she had opened up an invitation so JT and I could go to her house and, be there with her and her guests and other fellow Jehovah's Witnesses and all of that. So then she told me, she said to me, so that was the conversation we had. Then she said to me, go ahead and send me the link. Just send me what you've been reading. And I think it was some girl named Sean, like Sean's Corner, Sean's Circle, or whatever it was. And this girl had compiled all of these resources online talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. It wasn't like apostate stuff. It was just things that it was just watchtower articles and things like that. So my friend, the girl who was the bridesmaid in my wedding, sent me a nice little email, uninviting me to her home, telling me that because we do not agree on the same things, she said to me, there would be no reason for you and your husband to come to my home. So we got uninvited. Because remember, you could tell me anything. I'm easy. I believe that people should be able to think on their own and da-da-da-da-da. Send me the link. I'll look it over. To see ya, don't want to be ya. Right? So, I mean, it taught me a lot. I've learned a lot throughout the years. I mean, when I tell you, I've learned a lot after leaving. I learned a lot just talking to people that left. And a lot of people that left, they could put in words, but I could think it, but they could put it in words better than me, But I could sit there and, I could probably talk a whole lot longer about a lot of stuff that just happened to me leaving and being there and just hating, being at the Kingdom Hall with all these crazy people. Just a lot of memories. I had good memories too. It's not everything wasn't bad, but I will say the majority of everything was scripted. Because you knew that you were not going to go to the Kingdom Hall and say certain things because people were going to look at you out of the corner of their eye, and everything was always equated with being spiritual or not, But JT was better than me because he didn't say nothing to anybody, even my dad, He didn't say anything to his mom or anything. And I think it was 10 years later, she had left the organization and didn't say anything to us because she was afraid that JT was going to turn her in. So that's what he dealt with, He dealt with that, but he didn't say anything to his mom, right? So JT had a book, Crisis of Conscience. And I somehow thought that he was going to send that book to his mom. Guess what happened?
What?
Let me do him a favor. He hasn't sent that book yet. I packed up that book, put it in an envelope, addressed it to my mother-in-law, and sent her the Crisis of Conscience book.
Good for
crazy. So JT was like, he was like, no, 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 no. I did buy that for Mama. I did. But I wasn't going to send it to her now. That was funny. So I sent her the book. She didn't do anything. She didn't do anything about it. But she said I think she kept the book, but she didn't read it for years later. And she didn't want to deal with it because one time we were at her house and she told me that she showed me a piece of paper and she had a scripture on it. And she said, you see this right here? She said, if they would change their teaching on this, I would go back. And I just don't remember what it was because I wasn't really, paying attention like that. But she said she would go back, So I was like, oh my God. So I guess people will go back for different reasons, right? But yeah.
Oh.
But like I said, JT knew. He said, I know what it means when you leave and you try to go back and talk to people. He said, these people are so indoctrinated that no matter what you say, they're not going to listen because it has to be their journey.
And the thing is, too, they often will say that we're possessed by Satan when we're talking, right? If we've got, just instantly, that's what's happening. We're Satan, so back away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you gave that book to his mom and she didn't read it for a long time, you said she eventually read it. So did she leave? Is JT's mom out?
She actually left before we did and stopped going to meetings.
Oh, okay.
And she was going to church. She was searching for something, right? So she was going to like Joyce Meyer's conventions.
Oh.
She was going to T.D. Jakes conventions and stuff like that. So she was kind of like educating herself with, and there was another man. It was an older man, and I forgot his name, but she had sent me one of his tapes. So when I say she wasn't doing Jehovah's Witness stuff anymore, she wasn't really looking to say that this was not the truth. She was just doing her thing at other churches, and mainly going to conventions. She had gotten into this thing where she was doing, what do you call them? Those memes that people do, positive memes. She was into positive affirmations.
Okay, affirmations.
Her whole thing was about being positive.
Yeah.
So if it didn't have a positive ring, she didn't want nothing to do with it. So that meant she didn't want to talk about Jehovah's Witness stuff either. No. See? Because you talking against the organization or talking about the organization was negative. That was not what she wanted to do. She didn't want to talk about negative stuff. So she was on a journey to find positive stuff to say, not negative stuff. She wasn't into that.
Right.
And so we really never got too far with her, with the Ray Franz. Because like I said, if it wasn't positive, she didn't want nothing to do with it.
Right.
So, but she did start to delve into reading it. But, then she got sick and a whole lot of other stuff, went down. And then we ended up losing her and my mom within 60 days of each other. So both of us lost our moms. But so we never got a chance to revisit what we were doing.
Right. Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you.
So what does freedom look like for you guys now?
Oh, my goodness. Freedom to me is being able to just be me, to be able to think and plan and mentally grow, getting out of the fixed mindset, knowing that if I don't know how to do something, I have the freedom to learn it. We went to school after leaving the religion. I don't know that I would do that again if I left, and if I did, I would not take as long to graduate, because it actually took me 10 years to go to school because I was not doing it full time. And I think I wasted so much time, just trying to get through my degree, but we finally did that. But just taking in knowledge, being able to have friends, being able to explore different avenues of life and not not feeling like I have to agree with somebody just because, like for me, freedom is not looking like I have to be asking for permission to do something, even for my husband. I mean, we have a relationship that we consider each other and take each other into consideration, but I don't have to go ask for permission to take a class, and stuff like that. Where before it's like, oh my God, I gotta let my husband know I'm taking this class over here, because he might get in trouble because he's an elder and they don't want his wife going to university, whatever, that kind of stuff. So you feel like you have the freedom to do things that you want to do,
And I think, your YouTube channel that you and JT had together, Critical Thinker. And that was honestly, like, to me, freedom is to be able to be a critical thinker yourself.
Yes.
You can have a mind of your own, make your own decisions, think for yourself. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, because on the Critical Thinker channel, I'm the executive producer. So yeah, I actually started that channel. In fact, a lot of the stuff that I have on there is not there anymore. But the bottom line is, I'm the executive producer on XJW Critical Thinker. JT actually coined the name Critical Thinker, and we actually had another channel before that on Blog Talk Radio, and then we kind of moved over to that platform on YouTube. But yeah, I'm the person that's coming up with all these different things. That's why I'm moving over to the channel. Actually, the Hidden Struggles channel that I have is still kind of like, I would say, a work in progress. Like, when you leave this religion and you're trying to still find yourself, well, Hidden Struggles is still finding itself on this platform, right? But the tagline is learn life lessons without going through the experience. So the whole goal of that channel was to actually, interview people who had left the religion, and they would be able to talk about their hidden struggles. They would be able to talk about what they learned after leaving and how they're moving on with their lives and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I was going with that channel. And, giving people an outlet to show, hey, look, I'm not going to just come out and talk about being a Jehovah's Witness and talking about, waking up to being a Jehovah's Witness. I want to talk about what I did after I left. So that's what that platform is for.
I love that, because that's exactly what Awaken to Freedom is. Except mine isn't just, I don't just focus on XJW. I work, any ex-cult member, as well as toxic relationships. My husband's family was Mormon.
You know what? And see, when you're in this religion, you think it's normal because that's all you know. And I actually believe that a lot of people, when they talk about their experience as being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, they always make it about, was I able to celebrate the holidays and birthdays? And I've seen grown adults come into this religion at 30, and you wouldn't even know that they came in at that age. They become so engrossed and indoctrinated to the point that they just leave all senses. And they've taken a leave of their senses. The Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't have to be born in or coming in as a child. You can actually get in and just go with the flow. And it's almost like you didn't skip a beat. And I know a sister in our old congregation like that. She lost everybody in her family. She had a sister. They were close. They were just that close, to the point where her sister has nothing to do with her. Absolutely nothing. So it's almost like, were they ever even sisters? I'm like, where's those memories? They're not making any more memories. They're not having anything else to do with each other because her sister just does not like Jehovah's Witnesses. So I think that when people get involved with these groups, I mean, it just takes over their lives, and they just forget all about where they came from. All because of this. You can't talk to somebody who's not part of your group.
And like I kind of feel like these type of like Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, the Scientologists, they're so similar. Like Jehovah's Witnesses think they're so original, but they're not. They're almost identical. It's very cultish, right? So that's again, like we were talking about, that's why I wanted to start this channel too. And we're almost parallel because it was like, I want to know how you left and I want to know how you fixed your life. I want to give people hope that when you leave a situation like that, you could move on. What actually made you start Hidden Struggles? Was there something particular that made you want to start that?
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you a funny story. So the name of that channel was called One Wish.
Okay.
I was doing a series. I did about 20 videos about if you had one wish, what would that one wish be? And it was like in, embryonic stages, had nothing to do with religion. It just had to be, it was just dealing with, who you wanted to be, where you wanted to go in your life. Then I went to go see this movie at the movie theater. And the name of the movie was called Hidden Figures. Hidden Figures, where the African American women were the women that helped get the numbers for the space flight.
Saw that. Yeah.
So I come home and I said to myself, you know what? I think I could do this channel and I could call it Hidden Struggles. That's gonna be my new title for this video, for this YouTube channel. Hidden Struggles is it. So after I went to go see that movie, Hidden Struggles was born.
Oh, okay.
And my dad kept saying, I don't get it. He goes, who is going to watch that? He goes, Hidden Struggles. I don't get it. It makes no sense. Nobody's going to want to watch Hidden Struggles. I said, Daddy, nobody cares about the name of your channel. And we kept going back and forth, back and forth. I don't get it. I still don't understand it. I said, people only they watch your channel off of the name of the video, not the name of the channel, And then I met with this lady on LinkedIn, and I told her the name of my channel, and she looked at me and she said, that is a good channel name. How did you get that name? And she's looking at me like, so I'm telling my dad, see, Daddy, she said, Hidden Struggles is good. I don't care. I don't get it. So I said, I got to ask him again, do you still have an issue? I think he still has an issue with my name. I'm like, I don't care, But that's how I got the name of the channel, was through that movie, Hidden Figures, and then Hidden Struggles.
I love it.
Funny.
I picked my name because of it was like the Awake.
Right. That's good.
And I'm like, we're gonna awaken to freedom here because we're tossing that one out.
That's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Uh,
But my only thing about Hidden Struggles is like, I had got a T-shirt, right? So on my T-shirt, they're called Hidden Struggles. So I said to JT the other day, I said, you know what's kind of crazy? I said, who wants to walk around with a T-shirt that says Hidden Struggles? I said, I got to do something with that T-shirt. I'm not gonna be walking around. I said, can you imagine a guy? Because I mean, this platform is supposed to be for guys too. I'm like, what guy is gonna be walking around with a T-shirt saying Hidden Struggles? So that was funny. But
I thought when you said a T-shirt, I'm like, our boobs are Hidden Struggles.
I didn't think about that. That is funny. But I mean, I'm just saying, I'm like a wordsmith sometimes, and I like to kind of play on words. And
Yep, me too.
I just wanted two words. I wanted it to hit. I wanted it to whatever. I wanted it to just be banging, right?
Yeah.
So that's how Hidden Struggles came alive.
I love it.
Thanks.
So you said that it's for men and women, like the platform is for everybody. So like you were mentioning that it's about people who have left and have kind of built their lives. So what kind of topics do you cover?
Well, that story, that channel has been born and reborn is what do you call it when you call it born again? That
Born
channel
again?
has been born again so many times. Right now, I just did an interview with Just June on there.
Oh, I love Justine.
And yeah, she was one of my guests, and another young lady I interviewed. And I have an interesting guest coming up shortly that's going to be on there. So stay tuned for that. But it's really going to just be, I'm going to really try to just make it about interviews and stuff. And sometimes I'll come out and do some different things on there. Like I did one about going out of business, right? So when I lived in the Detroit area, they had this hat store called Louis the Hatter, and every week Louis the Hatter was going out of business. So I took that and did a video about the Watchtower going out of business. I even called this new store and said, "Do you remember?" I said, "Is this Louis the Hatter?" I said, "Did you guys used to be called Louis the Hatter?" And the guy said, "No, we're Henry the Hatter," or whatever it was. And I said, because years ago they used to have this commercial that Louis the Hatter was always going out of business. And the guy said, yeah. And I actually had that in my video where I recorded our conversation. The guy is talking about Henry the Hatter was not Louis the Hatter. And then I kind of brought that into my video and talked about how the Watchtower is always going out of business. You know, so I kind of like tied that in there with that. So I did like a solo of just me talking.
Yeah.
And then I ran into some people out in field service and they were doing street work. And I came back home and I did a video about these Jehovah's Witnesses doing street work. I did something about the witnesses in prison. You know, so I was covering those kind of articles. I did a Chat GPT video about how you could wake up your family members using Chat GPT. I had a panel discussion on there talking about Roe versus Wade, you know, when they overturned that. So I did some of those kind of issues, you know.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
but it's going to be expanding and being born again as time goes on. But, you know, just interesting things that people want to talk about.
Absolutely.
I haven't really done politics, but I think I kind of want to stay away from that.
Right now, anyway, the next 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. You know.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. And I kind of feel like my channel is probably going to be the same way. You know, I'm doing this right now, but I can see it evolving into other topics or things like that too. Kind of just general interest of what anybody wants to hear and what somebody else wants to talk about, right? Because I'm more of an interview based, but that's awesome. So what advice would you give to someone who is waking up but is scared to take the next step?
Oh, I would definitely tell them, don't talk to other people about what you're learning.
Amen.
And I would put it out there like this. It's like when you get ready to go in to have surgery, heaven forbid anybody has to do that. When you go into the operating room, you're not taking anybody with you. I'm using surgery as an example because I don't want to use death. So you're not taking anybody in the operating room with you. So make it like, hey, look, when you wake up, you're going through a process, and you're going through a mental surgical process of dissecting everything that you ever were taught, learned, whatever it was, and you have to do that on your own. No one's going to be with you during that surgical process because you have to work out what you were taught. Because even though JT and I were both raised as Jehovah's Witnesses, we were indoctrinated differently. He was a man, I'm a woman. And so at that point, you know, he's got to unlearn stuff that a brother was taught. I got to unlearn stuff a woman was taught. So when you're waking up, you know, let that be your moment. Let that be your journey. But don't try to bring other people into your journey, because I'm going to tell you a true life story. A young lady reached out to us. She was waking up. She had a friend who was getting ready to go serve where the need was great. She had all of her plans in motion, her friend. So she's waking up. Her friend has plans in motion to do something. And I told her, I said, it is not fair that you woke up on your own terms. You got a chance to digest the information, understand what you were going through, and then you decided to mess up somebody else's life by bringing them into your information pool, as it were. So now you're not giving her a chance to go do what she wants to do. She's excited about this new chapter in her life. You have got to let other people discover what they're going to do later. But don't mess up their flow because you had a chance to digest what you're learning, and you're going to just throw that on her, like 10 different things about the Watchtower, and you got to digest one thing at a time. So I said, that's not fair to other people to do that, because it's devastating as it is, waking up on your own, let alone trying to bring somebody else into that information that they're not ready for, And so I think a lot of people, they don't want to hear it. And so you don't know what people have going on in their lives, and once they get the information, you can't take it back. So I would definitely tell people, just let this be your journey. Take it slow. Don't talk to other people, because especially if you have to depend on on somebody to live, like you may be living with your parents. You may be working a job, working for other Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So at that point, you don't want to lose your home or your job either. So just take it slow.
That's great advice. That's really great advice, because I think when people wake up, it's shocking, if they've discovered something like the child abuse cases or something like that, the first thing they want to do is just go like, oh my God, do you know about this? So that's great advice to just scale it back and we got to let people discover this on their own, because they don't want to hear it, right? And I remember that was just June's experience with her husband. I brought that up even a little bit earlier, but just the way that her husband did that, was so gentle with everything, and letting her make the decision to ask him what was going on, right? It's kind of how it has to be, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like, I guess I would say you have to know where that person is in their life. So like my father, he was having issues with not feeling like he fit in. And I think he could have been in a situation, I could take it or leave it.
Right.
So if you know somebody is not fully invested, it's a different situation. But I feel like you got to meet people where they are. That's right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Lady C. That was a fantastic interview. And thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today, that we could hear your story and find out about your channels. So if anybody wants to go and listen, Hidden Struggles on YouTube, we'll post the link at the bottom, and XJW Critical Thinker as well. We'll post that too. Go check those channels out. They're definitely worth seeking, for sure. So
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. You have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.